Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Your favorite podcast, it's Critical Plus.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish. They're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Greetings, Wednesday Whammers. The Silverline pros are taking this week off for Thanksgiving break. However, while we're indulging in turkey and dressing, cranberry sauce, and maybe a little too much pumpkin pie, you can indulge in this classic episode of Wednesday Wham from the archives. Up next.
Okay, welcome to Silverline Comics panel. We're going to be discussing today breaking into the comics industry. I am Curtis Fujita. I'm the creative director at Silverline. I'm also the editor on the Kayla series. I'm an artist with experience in comic books, video games, and animation. I'm going to go around and go ahead and introduce our esteemed guests. So first up is John Martin, also known as John the Viking Prince Voltan Martin. Say that 3 times. John is one of our stellar inkers here at Silverline, working on projects like Friar Rush and multiple other titles. So this is John, and we'll go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next panelist, which is Aaron Humphreys. Aaron is the creator of the epic webcomic series Godlings, which is nearing its completion. He's also a regular contributor to the streaming show Silverline Sunday, where he brings his insightful commentary on the comic book industry to a weekly audience. He's the penciler on Silverline Comics' Friar Rush. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, Curtis.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. And next up is Tommy Florimonte.
Hello.
Tommy is a veteran inker of comic books, having worked for almost every major publisher out there, like Marvel, Malibu, Chaos, Acclaim, and Gallant Comics. He is currently the inker on Trunks and the upcoming Champion Miss Fury books by Silverline.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy also runs the premier digital comic book printing company Kablam with his business partner, Barry Gray. Welcome, Tommy.
Hello.
And next up is John Medic. John is the creator of the independent comic sensation Sniper and Rook. He's also an editor with us at Silverline, and the official historian of all things Silverline Comics. as noted by his excellent slideshow presentations, and also a regular contributor to our Wednesday Wham show. Welcome, John.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hello,
Glad to
Roberta.
be here.
Hey.
All right, and I see Roberta Conroy just entered the room, so I'm going to introduce Roberta. Roberta is an artist hailing from Los Angeles, California. She has worked in comic books, magazine publishing, and commercial art. She began her career as part of Malibu Comics' innovative digital coloring department and now works as a graphic designer by day and is coloring for Silverline Comics on the titles Cat and Mouse and the new Champion and Miss Fury comic book. Welcome,
Yes.
Roberta.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah.
And also joining us is R.A. Jones. R.A. Jones has a long and storied career in comics, born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he still resides. R.A. has been a professional writer and editor for more than 35 years. He has written some of the most beloved comic book stories ever put to print, working for powerhouses like Marvel, DC, Malibu Comics, Dark Horse, and Image Comics. In the world of prose fiction, he has written numerous novels, including the Steel Ring Saga, and he is the writer for Silverline titles Twilight Grim and White Devil. Welcome, R.A.
Nice to be here.
Excellent. Good to have you here. And just in is Roland Mann. You can't really have a Silverline Comics panel without Roland Mann. You can't have Silverline Comics without Roland Mann. So let's talk about it.
He is the man.
He is the man. He is the man. Roland Mann is a writer, professor, and former Marvel Comics editor. He is the founder and head honcho of Silverline Comics and the creator-writer of many acclaimed books like Cat and Mouse, Trumps, and Demon's Tales. He is the driving force of everything Silverline does and everything Silverline loves. Welcome, Roland.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It even says head honcho on the card there.
It's official. It's official.
Didn't you have to print that up yourself?
Yeah.
Though, right? You could have put whatever you wanted on it.
They could print it if it wasn't true.
That was true.
This lovely card designed by Curtis, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful Silverline cards. Yep.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Okay, so let's get down to the matter at hand. So we are talking about how to break into comic books. I would think every great comic book has an origin story. So I want to hear the origin story about each and every single one of you and how you first broke into comic books. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to kind of follow the way it's displayed at my screen here. So I'm going to, first person up is John Martin. John, please feel free to let everybody know how you got your start in comics.
My start is just resiliency, I guess. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of mentors in Dean Zachary and Mitch Faust.
Good dudes.
And,
Good dudes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought I was muted.
And my first actual inking assignment was actually on an Antarctic Press book called Steam Age Wasteland that was put out by an actual Facebook group called The Collector's Corner. I ended up inking a pin-up in that, so that was my first little in. And then I did with Mitch, I inked a short story for an anthology, and shortly after that all happened, Dean was telling Roland, hey, you check out this guy's inking, and at a con, and right there at that con on the first day, I was offered the job of inking Fry Rush.
Excellent. Very good. You're gonna hear a lot about that word that John dropped, resiliency. I have a feeling if you made it into the comic industry, and even more so if you stayed in the comic book industry, resiliency is gonna be part of your pedigree. So let's move on to the next person on the row here. So I'm gonna have Aaron, if you could just share with people how you got your start in breaking into comics.
Yeah, I can. This might be. I'll break this into two parts. So I actually drew and wrote a children's book, which was published by Action Lab. So I have two kids' books. Action Lab is a comic book company, so there's kind of a weird way. Even though it's kids' books, it's in the comic book company. And the second part was the Fire Rush story, where I found out I did Fry Rush 20 years ago, and I think we all know this story. There was miscommunication. I found that I was the original penciler. I was asked, and then from there I was like, oh, I was asked to join Silverline because I was actually the penciler on Firebrush, and that mistake was corrected or whatever. So yeah, that's how I broke in.
And you're a cool dude, so
yeah, and I'm cool. I'm a relaxed guy, so yeah.
I mean, you penciled the book, you might as well become part of the group.
Yeah,
right?
you would think so. Poland was like, well, I guess you're really kind of already part. You might as well just officially come in.
Yeah, I mean, we're using. Yeah, you're going to be drawing the book.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't quite get that story, we'll refer you to. This is when we need one of those little editor's notes, like the comics, right?
Yeah,
exactly. See stream number such and such.
Yeah, it was really explained in detail on a stream. Yeah,
we went out. I'll try to dig that up and post that link.
Yeah, that's a story.
Yeah.
It is a story.
Excellent. Next up is R.A. Jones. I haven't had the chance to ever meet R.A. in person, but I've known his work for decades now.
How have you not met R.A. in person?
I know, right? I know.
I've been everywhere.
I know. I've been nowhere. That's the problem. You know.
He's been everywhere, but you've been no place. So.
Yeah. But R.A. has such a vast background. I was rolling the system. I used to love reading his protectors and all the scripts coming in, and I got to get first crack at looking at them. I'd be very interested to hear from you, R.A. How did you first break into comic books?
My first breakthrough actually came through something that's, I guess, virtually non-existent in a physical sense anymore, the comic book fan magazine. There was a magazine being published by Fantagraphics called Amazing Heroes. That was one of the more popular fan magazines of the day back in the 1980s. And I got my start writing articles for them and wrangled my way into the position of becoming the resident comic book reviewer. So I got to hold forth and editorialize about comics twice a month. They're an Amazing Heroes, and that got me known to the fans, but also to the professionals, because there were plenty of writers, artists, editors who read those magazines back then as well, and became a regular attendee at conventions as well. That's one thing that people need to realize and understand at all times, is that as artistic, as creative, as fun as the comics business is, it is also still a business, and it operates under at least some of the same rules as any other business. And one of the rules of good business is networking. It sometimes is who you know as much as what you know that counts. So the conventions were a way to make myself even more known. And then actually my transition from the fan side into the professional end of it initially was not as a writer per se, it was as an editor. Because of my writing in the fan magazines, I was asked to be the editor for a small comic book publisher called Elite Comics, and that's I got my start there. Elite, unfortunately, went the way of all pulp fairly quickly, but that in turn had given me a foothold, and I became one of the early freelancers to do work for Malibu Comics, and eventually went on to do so much work for them that one comic pro once referred to me as the guy who wrote every independent comic book that Chuck Dixon wasn't writing.
Okay.
It's kind of and grew from there.
Excellent. Well, we're going to turn it over to Tommy Flormonte. Tommy has a really interesting story, and we were talking about resiliency and persistence. I'm sure Tommy can talk a little bit, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but no, I've always loved comics and cartoons and that kinds of. I could always, I could always draw, not professionally, but I always had a knack for being able to pick up things. And it just so happens while I was in college, I met some folks that were, I'm not going to say who they are, Roland man, that were in the same dorm. We all went to USM, and I was doing a different field of study at the time, computer science. But I started, we were acquaintances. I don't know if we'd call ourselves friends, but we were friendly.
Mhm.
We didn't really all hang out. We kind of hung out with the same groups of people, but we weren't like, they were a year or two above me, I guess.
Mhm.
And at some point, I realized that and I getting comics and stuff and love doing my doodles and all that kind of stuff. But I was still studying computer science, and that's what actually I finished my degree in. But the I noticed that they started getting work doing comics and stuff, and I'm like, this is really cool. I'd like to try to do that. And so I just started kind of, it's kind of like what RA said a while ago. It's knowing folks, and I just started hanging out with these guys, and they put me in the right direction, and eventually my art started getting better, and it stunk really bad at the beginning, but it one day all of a sudden it was like, wow, this actually looks really good. And Roland really tells the story better than I do, but he they helped me break in. Roland, Stephen Butler, and Mitch Bird, they're my guys that helped me get in. And then there were some other people that also took me under their wing. I did a lot of background work. We call it ghost work for Jimmy Pontiati. And I think therefore anything that you saw his name on in the 90s, I won't say everything, but a good bit of the stuff he that he had his name on, I did all the backgrounds. And so it's kind of, I've done a bunch of stuff for a bunch of publishers that I didn't get credit for, but that's how I broke in. It's through knowing folks and working really hard to get in.
That's a common thread here,
Yeah.
Let's turn it over to Roberta. Roberta, if you could kind of explain to people your experience and how you broke into comic books.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, I think the right place, right time, and knowing folks is probably the common theme here. I was a college art student, and some of my classmates had heard or were vying for a job at Malibu, and also I did have a contact. One of my mentors that I had interviewed was a great artist named Jerry Bingham.
Yeah.
And
Jerry's
these folks all were saying that Malibu was hiring, and I was shocked that it could be a job. I'm like, really? It's so exciting. I don't know. I made a good enough impression with my portfolio at the time, and they started ramping up at that point. And it was a great place to start because I could try a million different techniques and kind of hone my style. And it just was a great launch pad. So I think a little bit of luck more than anything else.
You mentioned you getting paid for that. That's one of the things that has always been a big detriment to any attempts ever made to create any sort of a guild or a union among comic creators, is simply the knowledge that there are, for each of us, there's 1,000 wannabes out there that would do this for free. And I was taken by surprise when I opened an envelope from Amazing Heroes magazine and found a check inside, because I didn't even realize they were going to pay me. I didn't care. I thought, well, maybe they'll give me a free copy of whatever issue my article appears in, but it'll give me a credit, and that's always important too. The more credits you can lay out in front of someone, the better your resume, the better your chances.
Yeah.
So,
I
literally was willing to work for free at that point.
Absolutely. I was going to chime in later about this, but you kind of, since we're on the subject, I think a lot of the time when people try and get a job in comic books, they kind of pigeonhole themselves, say, I'm a penciler, or I'm an inker, I'm this is what I want to do, and I will only accept this job to get into comic books. And sometimes it's better to get a job in comic books and then to push towards your career. For me, I've told the story to some of these folks before, but I'll try and do the abbreviated version. I started at Malibu when I was 15 years old, and I had gotten a tour of the comic book company for my birthday, and Chris Olm, the editor-in-chief, took me there. And about a week later, at the suggestion of my stepdad. He said, "Why don't you try and get a job there? Try and get an internship." So Mom dropped me off and she left. I didn't have a car to take me back home. And
Get a job to get some
So you were
taxi
back
money
there.
to get home.
Yeah, and I just
Don't come
walked
home
in the
until you
office.
have a job.
Exactly.
And there was
And
no
I-
Uber at that point.
That's right.
Oh
You're
no,
stuck.
this is like almost
You
25,
know, you
30
made a
years
very
ago,
good
right?
point too. If you go back far enough, you can find comic books that were, for instance, lettered by one of the Kubert boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Mantlo, the writer who did so much nice work for Marvel, I think started as a colorist. Peter David's original work was in
Marketing.
Marvel's marketing
That's right.
division.
That's right.
And if I'm not mistaken, one of the editors at Marvel, I won't use a name in case I get the wrong one, started as a started as kind of a janitor there.
Yeah.
Well, you know.
Well, and I think that's a big part of it is it's like when I got my job, the receptionist kicked me out of the office because I wanted to talk to Chris Ulm, and she didn't want a 15-year-old kid storming the office. And just so happened I saw Chris Ulm. I always remember he was in a turquoise blue Saab, and he was going to the parking lot. And I wanted it so bad. I stood up and I chased his car on foot through the parking lot, cornered him at his parking space.
Because you needed a ride home.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I told him, I said, he was shocked because I had practically, rushed in front of his door as he opened it. And I said, "I'm Curtis. I saw you last week. I'll do anything to work in comic books. I'll clean your toilets. I'll work for free." And he goes, "Okay, you're hired." And we immediately walked in past the receptionist. I started out as an intern, didn't have to clean toilets, and then became an editorial assistant, and then later on became a color designer. But I think that the common thread is find out what they need, fill that need. If it's somebody like me making copies and doing whatever, fill that need, and then you're in the system, and then you can pursue what your eventual goal is. But enough about me. We have a couple more panels to talk about how they broke into comics. Let's start with Roland Mann. Roland, talk about how you broke into comics.
Yeah, well, as Tommy's already mentioned, I grew up in Mississippi, and Mississippi is not, necessarily known as being a mecca for publishing comics, publishing any kind really, but publishing comics. And I was one of these. It's like, hey, I want to work in comics, but I don't really want to go to New York City. I didn't really want to go live in a big city, but I really wanted to work in comics. And at the time, if you wanted to work in comics, you went to Marvel or DC. And I know that there was Archie and some other. I don't even know where Archie was, to be honest with you, but I know there were some of the others out there. But really, if you wanted to work in comics, Marvel and DC, New York City is where you had to go. Now, as I got a little bit older, I realized that though there were a lot of independent companies, I didn't really know where they were too much. But I just started, submitting right and left, submitting stories, and most of them were, looking back on them now, most of them were crap. But I began collecting my rejection letters. And it wasn't until I know John mentioned it a little bit earlier in the first panel this morning, the Speedy panel. At college, I spotted a piece of artwork on a wall that had a character that I did not recognize, and I kind of, I read a lot of the independent comics by the time I'd gotten into college, and I did not recognize the character, and so I asked the guy who was standing there, "Hey, do you know who did this?" Because it was a big painting. I still own that actually. It's don't tell him, but it's in the barn at my parents' house. It's like
where all fine art hangs out.
It's like 6 foot tall, and
I think you just told him.
Yeah.
How did I never know this? I'm the historian.
Oh yeah.
I never knew you owned it.
I do. I have it. Yeah.
You're fired, John.
No, I think Roland's withholding.
I think he is.
No,
I didn't
no.
even know that you still had.
It's not something that's ever come up. I asked Steven if he wanted it back several years ago, and he's like, "No, you keep it, man." And I'm like, "Dude, it's so huge. I got nowhere to put it."
Yeah, I don't want it anymore. Can you take it, please?
Yeah.
My parents don't
I
want it.
happen to have a 2,000-foot house, and there's only 2 of us that live in it. Just saying.
There you go. So anyway, so I talked to Steven, and come to find out he did it. He wanted to break into comics. I wanted to break into comics. He had said he had rejection letters, so I couldn't talk to him that night. But I said, "Hey, look, well, give me your telephone number, and I'll come back and I'll see you." So I did. I came back, and we spent several hours talking that evening, basically swapping, our rejections stories. And it's great because he showed me this beautiful rejection from Roger McKenzie, who Roger McKenzie denies to this day that he rejected Stephen. But I saw the notes. He had scribbled notes all over the Stephen's artwork, and I still remember one of them, and I won't repeat here. But I've told Stephen about it. I remember it. But anyway, so we just decided, this was right after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So this was probably 87, and the Turtles had kind of they were kind of on the forefront of an independent comic book boom.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of got to talking, well, why don't we just do our own thing? And, so he and I agreed. He said, well, you know what? I've got a roommate who, or a suite mate, I think, because they were living in the suite style dorm. He goes, I got a suite mate that's also a really good artist. He's not that interested in comics, but he's a really good artist. And I know we could talk him into doing it. That was Mitch Bird. And, so I came back several times, but I came back another time, and me and Stephen and Mitch, we talked about all these different kind of things. I then brought in a lot of ideas that I had been working on, including stuff that I had been working with my friend Barry to try to kind of build this little. If we're going to have Stephen, we're going to have Mitch. We are obviously going to have more than one comic. And so we just decided, hey, let's start. We'll do top comics. We'll do our own thing, and we'll solicit. And we did, and we were in the catalogs. We got orders, and then we didn't have the money to do it. So we took the copies that we had then and like a shotgun blast, sent them out to all the independent comic companies. First, we went with EF Graphics. Ultimately, then we ended up at Aircell. And basically, once Aircell agreed to do the book, it was a lot easier to get other work because they would answer the phone, right? It's like, okay, you're the guy who does cat and mouse. Yeah, let me talk to, let me pick somebody in the directory. And they would push me through because I was the guy that did cat and mouse. And so I started calling up and begging for work essentially. Hey, Tom, you got anything else? Hey, Tom. Now, I will tell you this, and all publishers do this. They never, ever, ever, ever have work when you call. They don't. They don't. But what they do is they know what you and you don't, you can't be pushy, but you alert them to the fact that you're looking for more work. I remember a time I called Tom. I said, Tom, I'm looking for more work. I'll do anything, kind of like Ari was saying, I'll write something for free. Just give me some more work. Right. Tom said on the phone, Tom Mason. No. Tom Mason, who was the creative director at Malibu at the time. And I think they kind of shared editorial duties. He said, I got nothing for you. He goes, but I'll keep you in mind. The very next day he called me back. Hey, we got a project for you. And that's kind of the way it works.
That's great. Well, Roland's story is interesting. And one of the things that I'm assuming people watching this want to break into comic books. I mean, that's the name of the panel. The secret is you can break into comic books today. Yeah. And all that is make your own comic book.
Make a comic.
Yeah. I'm not saying you're going to make a great comic book, a good comic book, or to be frank, even a decent comic book. But you can be in the comic book industry today if you make your own comic book. Now, breaking into having another company publish your stuff is a completely different narrative that we can discuss. But you don't like what Roland did. You don't have to wait for somebody's permission. Yeah, you don't need permission to create a comic book. And in this day and age, and name drop here, with companies like Tommy's company, Kablam.
Yep, we can print it, and it'll look like a comic book. We print comics for anybody. So
like this.
Well, a tool that's available to everybody now, and I would encourage them to use them. A tool that was not available when Roland and I were breaking in, and that, of course, is simply the computer, the internet.
Yes, you put it online. It's
if you have to get your start by producing your own online comics, there's nothing wrong with that. And again, it gets your work out there, and once it's out there. It was an epiphany I had as a teenager when I suddenly realized, there's very little chance that Stan Lee is going to just happen to be walking past my front door and knock on it and say, "I had a feeling there was a comic book writer here." You know.
All right,
so I would have to do something instead to go to Stan Lee. Figuratively speaking.
All right, did you really just mention the internet?
I don't know much about it. It's a bunch of tubes, isn't it?
It's connected. It's connected by wires somehow.
But I am aware of it.
With a string between the two.
I will say that I thought it was funny when Curtis was talking about making your own comic book. He's like, look, just you're gonna make it. It's gonna suck. Just know it's gonna suck. Like it's going to be horrible. And so it was kind of funny. I was like, well, yeah, I guess going in, but it was just the way you said it. It was like, it's just not going to turn out good. And I'm like, oh,
but you know what?
But you're doing it.
But you're doing it. Oh, yeah.
Like it.
You got to get past the suck.
I think that's what he's trying to say. But it was just, I don't know, it was just kind of funny the way it came out.
Well, what I meant is more than anything is it's not necessarily.
Oh, you can't take it back now.
No. Hey, I'm the moderator. I get to take back stuff on this.
Oh, okay.
No, but I figured, the thing is, you may have varying degrees of reception, is what it boils down to. But you will have created a comic book. Now, you may be that person that creates it and it flies off the shelf, and good for you. But you're still creating comic books.
Another thing. Another thing to remember here too. Yeah. Another thing to remember is I talked about always treating our business as a business. The same is true of our talents, our skills. I remember reading, for those old enough to remember the Beatles, early in their career, they would perform in these sleazy nightclubs in Germany, where they would play for hours and hours and hours to drunken audiences that were slinging beer bottles around. But it said that it was during those hours, those nights, that they really, really honed their skills as musicians, because of doing it over and over and over again. And Thomas, you might could speak to that with artists. It's incredible sometimes. You see art samples from a young man or woman, and then as little as 6 months later, see a new set of samples from that same artist, and see a huge leap forward in the skill, the talent that's shown there. And it's like anything else. You learn in part by doing. It seems so obvious, but sometimes you have to remind writers, especially, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. If you want to be an artist, you have to draw. And again, like I say, the online comics or whatever it takes, if nothing else, it allows you to hone those skills to the point where hopefully you will reach that level of professionalism that others will recognize and appreciate and want to use.
You're absolutely right, R.A. And I think, a lot of people, look at creative talents as something that you're born with. You're born with the ability to just draw. And while, I'm not going to argue that people aren't, there aren't some people more inclined to do something than the other. Well, it's like, it's like sports. You can't pick up a baseball and throw a 90-mile-hour strike just immediately. You've got to practice and you've got to throw hundreds and hundreds of pitches before you can develop a curveball, before you can, and I don't understand why so many artists, and by artists, I mean writers, pencilers, inkers, I don't understand why so many artists think they don't have to do that. It's like, oh, I don't have to throw 1,000 pitches before I can, develop a really nasty curveball. It's like, well, no, yes, you do. You have to do this work.
Before we go on, we haven't heard from John yet. I want to make sure we have some time before because we're starting to that we hear from John Medic about his origin and his background. So, John, you've been very patiently waiting. Let's hear about how you got into comics.
He's got a PowerPoint.
He's got a PowerPoint.
No, but I'll have one next hour. Thanks, Curtis. And no, it was a great conversation, so I was enjoying following along. Mine was kind of a combination of what everybody was saying, a little bit of tenacity, a little bit of right place at right time. When I was in high school, I was a voracious comic book reader, and I did letter writing. So I didn't necessarily do articles. but I did write 2 comics that I liked. There happened to be this one guy named this one guy that happened to be named Roland Mann.
Oh, Roland again. Yeah, that guy.
I know, right? Who
Smart of
happened
you
to
to do
print
that.
happened to print my issue, sorry, what's it called? My letter in issue 12 of Cat and Mouse, available on eBay everywhere. If you want to see my first published something, it's a horribly written letter. I'm reading it. I'm like, oh my God, shoot you now. But actually that turned into pen paling back in the day when you had to like write on paper and put it in an envelope and mail it. Stuff that I hear that RJ would know, RA would know about.
Yes.
So from there, Roland became my mentor. I had a creative writing class in high school senior year. I wrote my big project as if it was a comic. Roland sent it back, wrote some notes on there, and the phrase that I still use these days when I review things for people, it's take what you like, chuck what you don't. I love that. And so, I kind of went from there. I worked in comic book stores through college. One comic store that I worked at, the owner knew a guy who was doing some publishing. That guy is now an editor over at Marvel. And he was doing a book called Manga News Watch Quarterly. So my first printed anything was a Robotech 2 The Sentinels review, followed by Vampire Hunter D. So that kind of got me in there. That comic store I was at had a secondary location by a mall. It was in the mall, and it was by a company that did Electronic Gaming Monthly, EGM, as Sendai Publications, and they were looking to put out a competing project with Wizard. They were originally going to call it Warhawk because that killed Wizards, but that was like their secret inside name, and they're not around anymore, so I'm not really doing anything on that. But most people would know what it evolved into was Hero Illustrated. If anybody was around in the 90s, Hero was a great publication. They actually tracked me down at the comic book store and took me in for my first real interview, offered me assistant editor of Hero Illustrated pre-launch. I was excited. I was stoked. I was in college. I was living at home, and mom and dad said I couldn't take it because I'd have to drop out of school. So I didn't do that. Went to another comic store and started creating my own characters. And then eventually just said, hey, I'm just going to self-publish. And I've been self-publishing since 99. When Roland brought out Silverline 3.0, I joined him. There was plans actually prior to the rebirth of Silverline in 3.0 for the Silverline universe of characters to merge with my Beta 3 comic characters. And that is moving forward under the Silverline banner where it should have always been. It's just being home. So, yep, that's my story.
There you go. Thank you, John. Well, we're starting to wind down. So, I had so many thoughts of subjects and things like that, but you can obviously hear we're all passionate about this and have a lot of different experiences. What I'd say is let's finish up briefly. Maybe if everybody would feel free just to kind of briefly give a parting piece of advice to somebody that's trying to break into comics. And I'm going to just to kind of keep it succinct. I'm just going to go down the row so everybody gets their time to say something, and then we'll wrap it up. So just a quick piece of advice. So for John Martin, John, what would be your parting piece of wisdom for those wanting to get into the industry?
Work hard, work, practice, go to conventions, get critiques, listen to those critiques, no matter how harsh they sound. Go back home, analyze take it in, go over the critiques in your head, look at what they were talking about, and then figure out how to best apply it. And then go back and get that critique again, because I notice that people, that artists, if they critique you and you come back and you show that you listened and you improved, that they will talk to you. You notice they warm up to you a little bit. They lean in a little more and they start talking about other things, and they don't talk to you the way they did the first time. It's a little, and they're giving you more things, and then you come back, and then they're like, then they start really talking. It's like, you're really getting there, so you have. That's the best thing I could say.
Yeah.
Great advice. Great advice. Aaron, what about yourself? What would be your piece of wisdom that you'd like to share with?
Probably
Aspiring
the
creators?
tenacity to finish what you started. This is probably the number one killer I see of a lot of independents. Tons of issue ones. So if you're gonna start hooking readers, if you're actually making your comic hooking readers, finish it. Even if it's you don't want to finish some, that way you get a completed story. And that just goes to the dedication to the work. And I think that just goes into the dedication of loving the craft. If you actually love the process of making comics, you'll be much more apt to go through and finish it than if you just are in love with the actual outcome of, I have a comic book, give it to a friend. You have to love the process. And I get that way too. I mean, by the time I'm done with a comic, people are like, oh, you created a comic, what? I'm like, yeah, okay, that's cool, but I got new stuff coming. See, I'm already in love with what I'm doing. So yeah, that would probably be my advice.
Great advice. Great advice. RA, would you like to share with your pearls of wisdom with people on how to break into the industry?
Well, absolutely. I don't know how pearlish they are, but I'll do it anyway. Obviously, what everyone has already said about again working hard, practicing, and so forth. I would add to that, if you want to be a professional, if you want to be treated like a professional, then you need to act like a professional. I decided fairly early on, after collecting my share of rejections, that I probably was not going to be the next Ernest Hemingway. So I looked at ways that I could possibly compensate for that, and I decided one of the ways was to work hard, to be easy to work with, to be cooperative with editors, to listen to what they had to say, and to keep your word, to meet or beat deadlines, and be someone they like to work with. And that can be as important as the fact that they like the work you do.
Yeah.
And I would also tell you that there is a psychological element to this as well, a hurdle that has to be overcome if you're going to make it. And that is simply that fear of rejection that we all have. And it is usually somewhat exaggerated. There's almost no chance that any editor is going to take the time to send you a scathing rejection telling you you're worthless and have no talent at all. They'll probably just say thanks, but no thanks. And rejection stings, but it doesn't kill. So you have to move past that, and you have to be willing to accept the rejection. And if you can do that, as I say, have a professional attitude about it, that increases your chances dramatically as far as finding people then who will in turn seek you out as someone they want to work with.
Excellent advice. Tommy, what about yourself? What would you like to share with everybody?
There's not a whole lot left. You guys have really hit on pretty much everything. The only thing I can really add, which helped me, and I think it would help a lot of beginner folks, is just to, you're not going to be friends with everybody, but try to be friendly with as many people as you possibly can. Don't burn any bridges just because you get a bad rejection or anything like that. Just take it for what it is and learn from it, get better. But try to know as many people as you possibly know that are already in, without pestering them like I did. But but just try to be friendly with everybody. Try to be somebody that it's. Roman and I have talked about this a ton of times. You may not be the best person for the job, but if you're the one that they like to hang around and work with and stuff, you'll get the job. Yep. Even though this other guy might be better, but it's like, I really like Thomas. He's a fun guy to be with, to work with. He's going to help promote the book. He's going to be a great guy. He's going to be on time. So know as many people as you possibly can. Don't pester people. I don't know how to explain where that line is, because I know I go over it. But know as many people as possible, and be friendly, and and everything else everybody said so far, and I'm sure what everybody's going to say after me, I'm going to add all that stuff on there too.
Excellent. Roberta, how about yourself? What would you recommend for people trying to break into?
Like Thomas said, there's not much left in the advice, but I'll try to some of the insights I think are the most important is observing the world, not just being in a microcosm, because I absorb a lot when I go out in the world and I'm part of comics. Some part of me is saying, I like how this lighting is, or I like the shapes that this person just made. And it just becomes part of your arsenal of
Of
seeing
your
the
tricks.
world.
That's right.
That's a
You can
great
use
point,
that.
Roberta. I've always said that about writers, that everything a writer sees, hears, tastes, touch can be research.
Yeah.
In that it can add to their ability then to convey that in words, and the same obviously is very true for artists as well. You're right.
Yeah. I'm adding on what she said onto mine. So
Tommy's gonna get all the credit. Just
that's
so
right.
everybody's
That's right.
clear.
That's
There you
right.
go.
So Roland, part and piece of wisdom for everybody.
Sure. I mean, I'm going to ditto what everybody else just said. And I think the only thing that I would add to that, and I think it was mentioned earlier, is that just do it. Do it. Don't sit around and wait for the opportunity. There's plenty of people out there who want to make comics. And if you're a penciler, or if you're an inker, or if you're a colorist, or if you're a writer, whatever, find other people who want to make comics and just do it. And even if you think, well, I did this comic, but not very many people are going to see it. That's okay. You did a comic. And the next comic, more people are going to see it. And the next comic, more people are going to see that. And meanwhile, you're going to get better, and you're going to, increase your own network of people that you know. So like Nike says, just do it.
Excellent. John Medic, parting piece of wisdom for everybody.
Well, when I do reviews and people are talking to me about wanting to work on one of my titles, I would definitely say for artists, please have more in your portfolio than just pinups. Pinups are great. They can
All
show.
I can do, John, is pinups.
What's that?
That's all I can draw is pinups. That's all I know how to do.
Oh, that's not true. I've seen some of your other amazing work, liar. But no. We also like to see that you can tell a story. So sequential pages, definitely very important. I came across a couple people over the years who said, "Oh, I just want to be a cover artist." Well, that's something that you grow into. Nobody just comes in as a cover artist. And then writers, if you're interested in writing, you need to have more than just like the initial pitch, just like, oh, I've got this idea. Well, kind of grow that idea. So that way, if people want a deeper dive and more of an analysis, you actually have something to provide to them. So that would be some of my suggestions.
Great. Well, for me, I would just, my little contribution is, I was watching a documentary with the wife last night. It was about Comic-Con, and they followed two pencilers trying to get work and going through portfolio reviews. And one of them was up to snuff and got hired. One of them wasn't. The thing that was interesting is how they handled criticism. And you could see one of the guy that didn't get any work, was so dejected when they wouldn't hire him and was so upset. And I think the realization is this. I think everybody, when you really get disappointed, you're always going to be hurt by rejection. But a lot of people get hurt by rejection when they realize that they were only willing to put in this amount of effort. And when they find out that the goalpost has moved and it's going to cost this much effort and time, that's where they have a problem, because it's not worth it to them. If you really love something, then when the goalpost moves, you're willing to put in that extra effort. But I think a lot of times people get frustrated with rejection is when they said to them, this is all I can do. This is all I can afford to do. This is all I want to do. Yeah. So, you have to not put the expectation of, it's an origin story. You can't put the expectation of where that story ends. You're going to be in it. You're going to navigate it, but it's not up to you to dictate how much more work, how far it's going to take, what it's going to take. You have to be open to that experience, and your success will be completely relative to the amount of effort and your tenacity. I mean, we talked about tenacity. So keep that in mind. We're going to finish up here. So we're just going to finish up with, I'm going to say how to find me online. Everybody else is going to say where they can find you online, carrier pigeon, whatever your method of finding you online is. Feel free to share it. For me, again, I'm Curtis Fujita. You can find me on Facebook, Curtis Fujita. You can also find me. I'm a martial arts instructor through my martial arts school, Tiger Crane, one word, 805 at Instagram and YouTube. And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to John Martin. John, where can the people find you?
Well, I've done a whole lot of changing, trying to work on some sort of branding here. So you see that little that long name that's printed up down at the base of this square that you see me in.
Yes,
if you type that in, you can find me.
All right, that's John the Viking Prince Voltan Martin. Okay. All right, Aaron Humphreys. Aaron, where can folks find you?
You find me on Facebook. My name, Aaron Humphreys, or Humphreys Illustration, just one word. It's also the name of my website. You find me on Instagram at ALH3810, which I really need to change that. I put that on there and it's stuck, but I really need to change something else. That might be changing soon. If it changes again, it would be Humphreys Illustration is what I would change it to if you're confused. But that's it so far. Oh, and then on Webtoons, you can find my Goblins comic on Webtoons, which I should be updating again here soon, starting to update.
Just getting close to completion, right?
Yes, it is getting close.
Very close.
And for RA, I know it. How can people, if not find you online, how can they stay abreast of your work, or what projects do you have coming up?
Well, actually, I do it very, very rarely, I'm afraid, but I actually am on Facebook occasionally. So yeah, R.A. Jones on Facebook. I don't think that Roland would mind if you contacted any of us through Silverline as well, if that was the most convenient way to do it. Hopefully, we'll have far-flung fans all over the country, if not the world. So that's always keep in touch. And what's that line, Roland? That they should something else they should do. Oh yeah, make mine Silverline.
Definitely. That's the best piece of advice, right?
Absolutely.
Tommy, how about you? Where can folks find you?
You can find, if you go to my own personal website is infernostudios.com. It's where I've got links there to pretty much everything. But just look for Florimonte. It's a weird spelling name, Florimonte. I'm pretty much everywhere. Just look up Florimonte and you'll find me.
Excellent.
Easy enough.
Roberta,
if you can remember how to spell it.
Yeah, well, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and under the name Roby Conroy, ROBI Conroy. And so I have a website, robyconroy.com. So you can find me there, or you can find me streaming on Silverline's Sunday. And I'm doing my artwork there. And yeah, I think the Make Mine Silverline is a great idea, because we could probably go through there.
Absolutely. And Roland, where can folks find you?
Yep, you can find me on the Book of Faces, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm Man Roland, but I'm there. Find me, or if you can find me through Silverline.
Excellent. John Medic.
Easiest way to find me, Facebook, last name Medic, METYCH. Not spelled at all like it sounds. Also on Facebook, Beta 3 Comics, BETA, the number 3 Comics. We'll get you some info about Sniper and Rook that'll be joining the Silverline family. Not possibly soon enough. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. And as we close out, just one more pearl of wisdom. Roland helps me out with writing and how to write stories. You don't always have to read a story directly from start to finish. It's all about which part does the story start. So we were talking about your entry into the Breaking the Comic Books is your origin story. When you get rejected, that's not the origin story. That's the backstory before the origin story begins. All right. So always remember when you get rejected.
Things.
That's
deep story. Wow, good stuff.
Yeah. So keep that in mind. And in the meantime, 1, 2, 3.
Make mine Silverline. All right.